on behalf of Nishmat, I welcome you all to this session on changing dynamics of conventional warfare. A few words about it. In the recent past, the dynamics of warfare have changed in a major way based on the analysis of war which have been fought between Azerbaijan and Armenia and the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. The interest of major powers have an overriding factor to abet confrontation for domination and economic reasons. The wars are being prosecuted based on alliances, and one-to-one, as it was in the past, seems to be past. The present war in Europe exhibits non-linear and nature, or in nature, in trading deep strikes on built-up areas and economic targets, resulting in humanitarian crisis in terms of civilian casualties and influx of refugees into neighboring countries. A new dimension has come into being in terms of non-state players or private armies, which have been employed by both the sides for their own benefit. The wars are characterized by a multi-domain application of media, space, artificial intelligence, and cyber. For this session, we have a very known personality in this field, and that is Major General SVP Singh, Vishis Seva Medal. Major General SVP Singh is the alumni of the prestigious Rashtriya Indian Military College, Dehradun, the National Defense Academy, and the Indian Military Academy. He was commissioned into the Regiment of Artillery in 1970. He's a veteran of the 1971 Indo-Pak War. In his 4 years, close to 4 decades of service in the Army, he has held key leadership roles in both conceptual and directional level in the military operations. He has held coveted command, staff, and instructional appointments. He has attended the prestigious courses at the Defense Services Staff College in Wellington, the College of Defense Management, and the National Defense College. He has had a very vast experience in both staff, command, and instructional appointments. He has been an instructor at the College of Defense Management in the field of human resource management, and also at the War College. He has attended the Advanced Management Program in Strategic Management, Cooperation and Decision-Making at the Management Development Institute in Gurgaon, Independent Director's Course in Cooperative Governance, Media Communication from the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, and Disaster Management from the National Institute of Disaster Management. He's a member of the IDSA, which is now presently the Mohan Parekar Institute of Defense Study and Analysis, and the United Services Institution. He's a recipient of Vishis Seva Medal for his distinguished service in 1999. He's a frequent speaker on TV on defense and defense matters. I will request General SVP Singh to firstly ask him one thing. Sir, is these wars which are being fought in Europe, are they one-to-one, or are they amalgamation or cooperation number of countries?
General Mehta, firstly, my gratitude and deep thanks for your introduction. I think we are both on the same levels, and I'm honored by Nismat for this introduction in all humility. Now, coming on to your question straight on, yes, you see the wars, the character of war, the nature of war keeps changing. But at the same time, I'll qualify that the principles of war never change. So now, what has happened in the 2 wars which you have just mentioned, let us look at it. Okay, what was the scenario post Second World War? Europe went through a very peaceful time during the Cold War, though both sides had built up very major forces: the Eastern Bloc, the Warsaw Pact countries, and the Western Bloc, the NATO countries. But these, I will still term Azerbaijan and Armenia war as a smaller one. But what has happened in Ukraine, the Russian-Ukraine war, is a definitely a major war, and it has shook up the whole world. But yes, first on to Azerbaijan, Armenia. You see, the three things stand out there. Firstly, I would say it's still a legacy of Soviet Union which brought about this war. The landscape of that, the geographical boundaries. Now, what has happened in this war is that the warring sides have been supported by some country or the other. So what does that imply? It is that proxy war, a new concept, has come into play, where the major powers do not participate physically. They don't get involved in footfalls. So in the case of Armenia, the Russians are supporting them. And in the case of Azerbaijan, it is the Turkey which is in support of them. And some new armaments are tried. So whenever such wars take place, it is the bigger powers who try out their armaments, who try out their technologies there. And so it is the drone warfare which came into the foreplay in this Azerbaijan and Armenia war. And Turkey, I should give them credit to have lent a new revolutionary military affairs to introduce drone warfare. And other the political constraints we know, the United States and other Western powers are also involved in political aspect of this war, and so are the Russians. But what is standing out at this time is that Russia is on a weaker wicket in support of Armenia. And Armenia has been suffering major casualties.
Yes.
I will now switch on to the Russian-Ukraine war. You see, this was a war in being, and this was simultaneously a war which could have been best avoided. So again, the roots of this war fall with the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1990. And when this happened, the Cold War came to an end, and the United States emerged as a unipolar world power. And here, Uncle Sam took upon itself the long-known role of the world's policeman. Now, slowly, NATO, which was a 12-member nation alliance, started expanding. I would say here, the United States betrayed the trust and faith which that General Secretary Gorbachev had put in America in the treaty which took place after the breakup of Soviet Union. That the Americans and the NATO will not expand eastwards. But this did not happen. Slowly, they went on expanding. And today, as we see, it is a 31-member nation. And perhaps in the next few days, we will see the 32nd member, Sweden, joining in. Now, what has happened in this? The Eastern European expanse has come or right on the doorsteps of the Russian boundaries, the Russian border. It is only Ukraine which remains as a sandwich or a buffer. And this is what the Americans and the NATO people want to remove. So the crux of this war is there. So the political aspect I have covered here. Now, secondly, what America aims is the weakening of Russia. And what does Russia aim at? To be on the high desk, to be counted among the superpowers, to be counted among the great powers. This is what Putin's ambition is, to get Russia back somewhere on what the erstwhile Soviet Union was. At the same time, if we see what is between Ukraine and Russia, again, it is Russia's boundary and its security, and Ukraine is fighting for its sovereignty and survival. Historically, if we look at Ukraine, it has been ruled, it has been conquered, it has fought many wars, and that has been the destiny of Ukraine. And if I had to recall Mekander, who had said that the Eurasian landmass lends power to great powers. So it is the East Europe nations which had that land in Beckender's concept and thought. And Ukraine is right at the edge. The word Ukraine means itself the edge. So this is the other aspect of it. Now, when this Americans did not pay heed to appeals or requirements of Putin, he then took upon annexing or going to war, firstly in Georgia. And secondly, when in 2013, the pro-Russian president of Ukraine was overthrown through the Maidan Revolution, it is then that Crimea was annexed by Putin. So when Crimea was annexed, the Western powers stayed quiet. They did not interfere much, except the good old concept of America to impose sanctions. So I will say another changing nature of war has been the war of sanctions, economic sanctions. And sanctions were imposed on Russia in 2014, and they continue to be imposed now in greater strength, in greater density. So it was.
I have one question for you. This is regards to the future wars, the present war which is being fought between Russia and Ukraine, and apparently is going to be for future war also. It's not one-to-one. It is based on alliances. Russia is fighting with alliance of Chechens and also some other people, whereas Ukraine is getting the support of NATO and the US. So it implies that the future wars are going to be based on alliances. Am I right, sir?
I would totally agree with you, General Mehta, on this. And you see, the warfare geopolitically, geostrategically, and I would combine geoeconomically today, are also dictating the wars, the military wars. Now, what has happened in the geopolitical and geostrategic field is that the background to this is that America seeks to fight proxy wars. Why so? I think historically, post Second World War, USA did not fight wars with others. It fought its own wars, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. But in that, it went in for alliances, not the Vietnam War, but the latter two alliances, the NATO. And what happened? NATO crumbled in Afghanistan. In Donald Trump's time also, he said NATO should pump in some money, their own finances. So NATO was crumbling. And what happened in Afghanistan, it was quite a shame for America to face such a defeat at the hands of Taliban. So when Ukraine war, Putin in his own strategic concept launched this war, which was a war in being for some time since the collapse of Soviet Union in 1990.
Right.
And NATO undertook upon itself to expand towards the eastern side, towards Russia. And from 12 nation NATO members, today it is 31. Next few days, it will be 32 members, perhaps with Sweden joining. Now, this has brought about major national security dangers to Russia, who perceives itself as a great power, and Putin aims to place in his grand strategy Russia back on the pedestal of being on high table with the great powers and be counted as a superpower. Now, this is the crux of it. And other is democracy versus autocracy. That is another form of changing nature of geopolitical and geostrategic situation. So the Western nation is projecting democracy, and Russia and, say, for example, China, they have their own form of governance. Xi Jinping calls itself democratic system, though, but this is what it is. So Russia, with this dangers to its borders, the NATO countries coming and threatening them, and then they would be placing missiles if they enter Ukraine. And he had been telling the NATO countries, and USA in particular, do not reach out any further. So he had to undertake this war as a compulsion, which he called it as the survival of Russia. So he went in for special military operations. So this is one aspect of the Russian-Ukraine war, which the world is seeing. And now it is over 500 days that this war has been going on. And whereas one thought that the might of the Russian military was a big scare, it was a fright to rest of the world. That that balloon has definitely burst. And what has happened now? That what one expected and the nature of war and the concepts and doctrines which were being advocated and literature written by the Russian generals of different types of war, including sixth generation warfare, that I think is not come to foreplay in this arena of the Ukraine battlefield in Ukraine land.
Sir, what you're saying now, it's basically what you mentioned, that it is geopolitical and geostrategic interest of the major powers. Now you see what has happened. Even China is claiming the seven dot line, the South China Sea. They're claiming Taiwan. They're claiming North Sea. The Chinese have abrogated all the agreements that they were with India to change their line of actual control. So it is the major powers which are in the world. They're looking into the geostrategic and geopolitical advantages. Am I right, sir?
Absolutely, Deepak. It is like this, that wherever a nation has become a great power, a great military power, they've always been hegemonic. This is the historical fact of nation states. So America, Chinese call them hegemonistic and call them revisionists in the earlier years of Mao. So now today, China, the sleeping giant, is now a giant which is roaring. The dragon has risen. And what has happened? Its comprehensive national power now is chasing the Americans, which with their target of becoming the leading power in the world by 2050. So China has its own claims. But when the CCP came to power in 1949 under Mao Zedong, China had now 14 land borders as per the historical perspective which they have taken forward, and any number of maritime boundary issues among the island territories of Southeast Asia. And then they cultivated reefs to become their own areas by establishing military installations there. Now, China, I would like to say here, was a nation today boundaries with 14 countries, but in history we have also read that its boundary ended with the Great Wall of China.
Yep.
So how the historical perspective is played is this thing. I may take the liberty of bringing India in. Look, in 1950, when Tibet was occupied, our issue with China started then. We never had any boundary problem, any problem with China. It is Tibet. And Tibet, China will not abandon, because it is the third pole, is the water tap of the world, particularly in Asia. 10 to 12 rivers emanate from it. China has water shortage. So Mao Zedong had identified that we must have the water and we must have the rivers for China to overcome our shortages. So that has been the greatest strategic move of China, a nation which plans, as we see and we read, 100 years vision. 2049 in our lifetime is not too far ahead, whether we see it or not. So that is the situation as you brought in China factor.
Sir, what you're saying, as I fully in agreement with you, is the interest, geopolitical, geostrategic interest. Now, what is happening in Sudan? It is one faction fighting against the other in the interest of the major powers, that the US and Russia. So they are both using the proxies. One is in Sudan, one is using the army, and the second is using the paramilitary forces. So these proxies will continue in times to come. Now, since we are taking Ukraine, Russia as a matrix to draw out certain lessons, what actually went wrong? There's a saying, there's a feeling, 2022, the Russians suffered heavy casualties. What is the reason for it, sir?
You see, February 2022, 24th February, is the time, the D-Day, when Putin crossed the Ukraine borders and launched his special military operations. Now, the Americans had been giving a feed-in through the intelligence system that they will be doing it anytime, and they were giving particular dates during the month of February. And it was also anticipated that after the Beijing visit, from those games which he had attended in Beijing, that after that, he will launch this war with Ukraine. And it did happen. But prior to that, for about a year and a half or two, there had been a build-up on the Ukrainian borders by Russia. And there was always a scare. I feel that this grand strategy of Putin at that time was a very solid one. That is a threat in being. And that threat in being was a greater danger to the Western world. And what had happened, they had started building up post-Afghanistan debacle. NATO started uniting, and they beefed up the troops deployment, which had never happened earlier in other NATO countries like Poland, Lithuania, Germany. So what had happened, Putin gave them some time as well. If he really wanted to go in for that operation and meet success, to my mind, it was when America was running away and in total disorganized state in August 2021 from Afghanistan. NATO and America were off balance, but he waited. And when he launched in the month of February, it was the fading winter, the snowy winter, the hard snow, because within a couple of months or less, snow starts melting. So when he launched this operation, the first casualty was the timing, the weather, which he, as a military planner, all his military general staff did not advise correctly. And now let us see what were the other causes of failures. It was, I think, a very good plan to launch military operations on 4 axes, starting from the north, the Belarus, which came down to Chernobyl and Chernihiv to target Kyiv as an objective. Then in northeast, Kharkiv, and in the east, the Donbass region containing Donetsk and Luhansk, and in the south, extending from the southwest Odessa up to southeast, the Mariupol. Now, it was a 4-pronged axis, very good plan, and it involved splitting the Ukrainian armed forces, military resources in number of areas. Particularly, it aimed to push away from Donbass region the very hard and good professional military formations of Ukraine. They would perhaps, they expected, go to Kharkiv and towards Kyiv, or even towards Kherson. Now, why did Russia not launch a blitzkrieg is the first failure, or the next failure from the weather and the season. They should have launched a blitzkrieg of the nature which America did in Iraq, carpet bombing. You see, he came with his military forces, the land forces in strength, but he did not indulge in massive carpet bombing, which would have leveled out Kyiv, because I'm speaking as a military man. If I'm a military commander, that's the way I have to go about it. And second is, what got into display was poor senior commander leadership and poor lower level tactical drills. from
Right, sir.
Rus
And there was one
comes.
report also to say that initial assault by them, by the Russians, was by the conscripts, and the regular troops were far behind. That could be one of the reasons for the heavy casualties they suffered in terms of equipment and manpower, because the Chats were not adequately trained. They did not go as per the tactical deployment or employment of the forces. That could be one of the reasons, sir.
Yes, sir, definitely. It is largely a conscript army. And let me tell you, during Soviet Union time also, during the season of agriculture time, during the harvesting time, the Soviet army used to indulge in agriculture duties, in farming duties. So that's why I say the bubble has burst, the balloon has burst. Now, this conscript army also contained members of the Russian society who were plumbers and other such trades. So they just pushed into it because when Putin launched his operation, what the literature says, open literature, that even the senior generals did not know what happened. And in the words of the Wagner commander Kadyrov, his battle commander said that when the Russian generals came to know the operation had been launched, their eyes had bulged. Now, there are element of truth. I get back to that Kiev push, his tanks. Look, they came in a convoy, 40 miles, 65 kilometers convoy. Can we believe it? Particularly in an Indian armed forces, that tanks are coming on a road in a single line, sitting ducks, and then they stopped at 25 kilometers short of Kiev when it was in striking distance because the head of the column had been hit. But what could be the other reasons? Again, the literature says one of them is that they had poor Chinese tires on these tanks or their vehicles. That stalled this thing. Second is they ran short of fuel. So, again, applying the principle of war, the mass was there, but maintenance of momentum was not there. And another principle of war, vital one, the logistic support was not there. So it counted towards their failure. But the other side, what happened with Ukrainians? They had this multi-rocket launchers systems, 354 pieces with them, and they did not utilize. What is the reason that Ukraine did not, now in this case, I would say, destroy as much of armor of Russia? And the reason, what literature again says, is that they didn't want to escalate, cause Russia more anger by causing them this destruction. Now, it is anyone's guess to believe, but what is really happened is this. So this remains a gray zone in the writings and the thinking of these strategists.
So it implies that the weather, the terrain, the leadership, and the tactical or operational deployment of forces is a very major issue in terms of planning, along with the logistic support. You brought all these points very well, sir. So one point which people keep talking of, what is the aspect of deep battle and deep operations? What does it actually mean, sir? Which both
Yes.
Russians as well as the US advocating.
Yes, General Mehta, this deep operations and deep attacks, they are again associated with the then Soviet Union, whose military strategists thought about it post First World War in the era of 1920s and 30s decades. And there was a big debate. Now, what happened? Deep attack, the Soviet Union military, the Red Army, associated with penetrating and blasting the front line. As they did that, they go deep into deep operations with all their long distance weapon systems to now destroy the logistics capability and bases of the enemy. Now, that was the concept of it. And Soviet Union did practice it quite a bit. Now, in this
So
war,
for this sort of an operation, what is imperative is that you should have intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capability to be built in for this sort of a thing. Both Americans and Russians are believing in this deep strike aspect, which has been exhibited adequately in Ukraine in terms of the fact that the Russians have been hitting the economic targets in Ukraine and also the built-up areas, resulting in a very large number of casualties. And I think about 3 million Ukrainians have gone to the neighboring countries. So I think the future wars are not going to be limited to the forward troops. Apparently, it's going to be deep into the interiors also. Right, sir?
absolutely, Deepak. I think this concept has been in vogue for quite some time in military warfare. That the military-industrial complex, which has become a very pet term these days, you must hit that industrial complex, and Russia has used it to good effect, undoubtedly. But must appreciate that Ukraine each time has recovered in rather quick time. So what has happened is when Russia has involved itself in this, there are two, three other aspects which I would cover later as you go along. These deep operations and these ISR, which you have mentioned, get combined. You need specific intelligence for these purposes. I'll give you an example. You have talked about built-up areas. Now, fighting in built-up areas is again a warfare by itself. It's not a plains warfare.
Right.
It is not mountain warfare. It is not the riverine warfare. So what has happened in the Ukraine battlefield? You have got riverine warfare, you have got the plains warfare, and you have got the built-up cities warfare, which has been going on. Now, cities and built-up areas also involve siege warfare, I would call it, laying siege. And in the Indian Army concept, such areas we call the nodal points, isolation, and investment. But these are much larger objectives. So Russians went in for this, but I think they fully did not master the art and tactics of fighting in the built-up area. I'll qualify with an example. You see, their organization, again, I feel, of the battalion tactical groups is all arms concept, which is a very good one. It was initiated even in the deep attack. Way back in 1920s, 30s, the Russian military strategists thought about it. Now, this battalion tactical group has got a lesser element, I will say weaker element of the infantry, the foot infantry. The mechanized infantry is there, the other elements are there. In built-up area, the maximum need is of infantry, the foot soldiers who go. It is house to house, it is post to post fighting, and where the use of artillery becomes limited, the use of tank becomes limited, because you actually don't want to destroy the civilian infrastructure. But in this war, another new nature of war, I would say Russia has introduced, is damage to the civilian infrastructure. And in this case, they have even targeted hospitals, schools, and offices. Yes, why they have done it? The Russian side of the story is that the Ukrainian soldiers were housing in that, and they were giving them hell as well. So both sides of the thing, one side qualifies war crimes charges, and other is Ukraine says we did it for our defense. Again, these truths are going to emerge, and these truths will only emerge when the war ends, whenever it ends. So that's the way I can put it.
So in short, it means that deep battle, deep operations entails attack simultaneously throughout the entire tactical and operational depth by using long-range artillery, airstrikes, and the forward deployment of tactical detachments with operational level maneuver groups. Right, sir?
Absolutely.
This aspect. Okay.
You're always right, Deepak. But I want to tell you,
No, no.
you know, this deep attack, deep operations, and the wider front also gets combined in today's warfare with two other aspects, and that is the non-linear and the non-contact war. I leave it to you to take it forward because
Yes.
these two aspects also mesh in the way this war has been going on or how both sides have fought.
So that was the next I was about to ask you about what is the non-linear warfare, which you answered by use of it. Apparently, feel that the use of precision-guided munitions, advanced intelligence, so that you can strike uh, at the given point where you want it to be. And now you see, like the example, these Russians have been using these UAVs, kamikaze UAVs, which they got from Iran. All these form part of non-linear warfare.
Yes, Deepak, you see, now this linear warfare was, progressive. It was graduated form of warfare, but and it could be on a wider front as well. But non-linear is involving what you said earlier, ISR. It's also involving your cyber. It's
Correct.
also involving what you said now today, the drones, UCAVs, and other elements of warfare which are not in direct contact.
Absolutely.
Non-linear it gets into that, and it has got a political connotation as well. Maybe the hot war is not on, but the non-linear war in today's world will continue politically in the cyber war, in the media war, the social media, and they continue. So this is also an aspect of non-linear. Sanctions on Russia is also non-linear war. So this is an ongoing war, which is we think that war is only the hot war, but in today's world, the nature of war has taken on where the economic aspects are even perhaps more important. The commercial interests are more important. It is that supply chain system which Ukraine war has seen. The world has got disrupted in that, and interdependent world, which was already learning its lessons on the supply chain system post pandemic, the China Wuhan virus, which is named as COVID-19. As the world was recovering, it has been hit very badly. And what is the real thing which have been hit is food, fertilizers, and grains on which the human subsistence level exists.
Correct.
Other parts of it, one can still meet the shortfalls, but food is the main thing. Food, grains is life giving after water and air. So that aspect is there. So non-linear, I feel NATO and the Russians practice it continuously, and so does our northern border country, China.
So, you had spoken about the principles of war. To have a decisive battle, you require concentration. Now, with the advanced ISR system, which all the countries are now building up, or they're building up, it implies that the application of force is going to be based on tactical, independent battalions, regiments, brigades, and they should be able to have a very high degree of mobility to converge at the point of decision. So I think there's a mismatch between the principles of war of concentration vis-a-vis this advanced ISR systems which are coming into being. So, but it means that you've got to have a very high mobility to come at the point of decision at a very fast pace.
I will agree with you there. In the non-linear aspect of war, this concentration part of it also covers that mass is really not applied even in non-linear operations. And now in this brigade groups and battalion groups, it's the formation is going to fight. It is not going to be there. But yes, when you are finding success at your point of decision, where you may have gone in with such brigade groups in 3 or 4 axes, then that point of decision where you have to exploit victory, it is your reserve element which should be well behind to push, to provide this concentration and maintenance of momentum. Now that's
Right,
very
sir.
important.
Very valid point. Very valid point, sir. Now, with this advanced technology which is coming into being, which is actually quite well exhibited by the Gulf War, is a non-contact warfare. That means you carry out massive destruction by air and by the other means, and have a small, you break the morale of the uh, fighting spirit of the adversary, and then go in for a small battle and win it. This again is a new concept which people are talking of, very non-linear and non-contact warfare. And for this, I think various aspects of technology come into being. Like media has played a very major role. One does not know who's saying the correct thing, but it is in terms of perception management. Media is playing a very major role. Your comments on this, sir?
Yeah, firstly, on the media aspect, I would say that in security, it is said trust but verify. And whatever comes in social media, you got to have your own other means with heckles on to verify. Now, that's very important because social media is not only providing information, but it's a great propaganda master.
Yes.
And it also influences the population of countries. The people get affected, and which way such wars or situations are taking place, the people then rise to influence the government. So, social media, though it's got a lot of pluses, has this bane, like deep fake and all being used today in military operations. Also, deep fake is being used, and I would say that Director CIA William Burns is on record to say now, normally the intelligence agencies and people, they don't talk about their modus operandi, or they don't even open their mouth to talk about what is happening. But his visit to Ukraine lately, and he said, we can do this and we will do that, and then he mentioned deepfake in the one conversation. So what I'm saying is the whole trend, whole characteristics, what is being done is all to put pressure. It is not peer pressure, it is pressure on the adversary. Okay, we are stronger, we are bigger than what you may be thinking. So this is where media is playing the role. Secondly, the non-contact part of warfare, which you mentioned. Yes, you see, warfare are getting various names. I will try to believe 4th generation, 5th generation, 6th generation warfare are good terminologies. But again, the Ukraine war has shown to us when it is 5th generation or 6th generation warfare, when the battle is enjoined, the gunner in me says, it is all artillery battle, and it is the battle of the artillery and missiles and rockets today, and that is the non-contact warfare, because you're delivering at not only standoff distance, at a much farther standoff distance. And come alongside them, the higher level, the cruise missiles, which have been used so effectively. So these are non-contact warfare. You look at the Ukraine war itself, you see, Russia, to my mind, has largely refrained from getting into infantry battles. It has been the Wagner forces, which you mentioned sometime about the non-state actors. Look, yes, they fought for about good 11 months in Bakhmut, and they got it back. And now what is happening? They are withdrawn, and it appears that Ukraine is again getting the better of it in Bakhmut. So Russia, perhaps, their troops and their junior level leadership, they have not been able to get to the basics of military tactics on the battlefield. So for them, non-contact warfare is very important. And look, what has America done recently? They have done away with that earlier the General Soleimani, and now yesterday they have brought down one of their generals again. It's all drone. And Israelis, what they did with Arafat, when he was staying in his in whatever residence he was, he could not move from his bedroom. That drones used to be surveilling on him, and he had to take permission to go to next room. Now that is the power of non-contact warfare.
Correct. And so now the things are going to be even more difficult in times to come. Firstly, is this cyber warfare. This can, have a major effect on the weapon systems, on the command and control. So cyber warfare is one which has to be very, very carefully looked into, sir.
So cyber warfare, you see the other domains of warfare, you mentioned multi-domain warfare. So cyber is one, electronic, there's the space, there's the outer space.
Correct.
Now these are the new dimensions of warfare which have come. You can call them fourth, fifth, sixth generation, whatever it is. You can call it among hybrid warfare, whatever. These are names. I treat them as semantics of military terminologies. But it is what is the effectiveness? And we have to now develop those capabilities. We expected, again, that the Russian cyber will be very effective. Cyber warfare will be very effective in the Ukraine operations. But it did not take off to that level. They have not been able to disrupt Ukraine, which we normally talked otherwise. Okay, there will be total disruption. The country can come to a standstill.
Absolutely.
And it did not happen. So I think the cyber capabilities also require organization, proper command and control structure. It has to get combined with your network-centric warfare and the systems of the command and control communication systems, which have to all dovetail into one. And then only, I think the cyber aspect would be really effective. Because to me, it appears the reasons would be that there has been disjointed approach even in the cyber operation which Russia has carried out.
So now you see, even this war in Europe has brought in a new dimension of private armies being utilized by both the sides. I think this is going to stay for some time. And what is happening is countries which are economically weak, but they have the manpower, the people from those countries are joining the private armies around the world. Quote an example. I heard a talk between some very senior people. The Nepalese are keen to join the private armies. This is a new dimension, and this is going to further exacerbate in times to come, sir.
It's a very hot and burning subject when you touch upon Nepalese, because forth for recruitment, the Gurkhas. And now this youth took employment in Indian Army Gurkha Rifle Regiment as very prestigious. And now, and apart from that, it was an employment avenue. It was an economic avenue for the families. Now that Nepal itself cannot provide to this youth. And this youth is a very motivated and a very adventurous sort of people, So yes, there are write-ups that they would like to join the Wagner forces wherever they are. They would like to join the Kadyrev's Checheni forces. And now Chinese, they have been listening. The Chinese want these Gurkhas to join in their PLA with some. Now, if it may not be PLA, it might become a private army. But China is a wise nation. You see, there are a lot of lessons emerging from this non-state actor and this mercenaries or the private military companies, of which now Russia, Wagner forces have played a very major and stellar role in the success of Russia. I mentioned Bakhmut. And this Wagner force is about 50 to 60,000 because Prigozhin has been able to make an empire within an empire. He is functioning in Africa. He is Mali, Syria, Tanzania, Central African Republic, all these places. And he provides personal security to these heads of states there.
That's right.
So he has been funded by Russia, though it's against the international law, but that's the truth. So mercenary warfare is another aspect of warfare we can call, which has been in existence since times immemorial. In African countries, there are a lot of mercenaries, and I will quote the Iran-Afghan war, where America used the Blackwater private military.
Correct.
And to good effect. So now Russia has used it, but what has happened? It became a parallel military force. Wagner is one extreme case because he had tanks, he had some aircraft, perhaps, and he had artillery. And apart from manpower, he had retired professionals of very high caliber. Then he got the prisoners out, convicts out from there. So it was life and death for them. And so they put in their might. Either way, they go to the maker. So they did whatever they did. But China's example I will give. I'll cover about the Nepalese part of it once more. But China has been very wise. In all the African nations, they've also got the private military, what we call the security elements. Correct. But they've utilized them for only commercial security. They do not arm them. In China, very limited police is also armed. It is the PLA, the arm of the CCP. They are armed. So they have ensured that no parallel military force rises to show the sort of mutinous or rebellion which Prigozhin tried in the recent times. So now this is a very major aspect of mercenary warfare, how you must keep them under your control. You see, now when on 1st July, the Russian Defense Ministry wanted Wagner forces to sign contract with them, that they're under the Defense Ministry, they refused.
Okay.
So that situation would have not come. Now, coming to the Nepalese part of it, Xi Jinping has shown a lot of interest. He has instituted studies somewhere, I think, about 5 years back, to know who are these Gurkha soldiers, how they are so fearsome, what is this cookery. He instituted this thing. Why are they so motivated? And how they're doing so well in the Indian army? Because in 1962 war also there's an example. When the Gurkha took out his cookery and did it well, effectively, pierced it into the Chinese, that is still fresh in the Chinese minds. This is the might of the great valorous soldiers which Gurkhas are. And he wants them to be there. But let me tell you about the Nepalese part. You see, the Nepalese Gurkhas are also there in the British army. And they are exploited there, unlike Indian army. In Indian army, we are very proud of them, and they are very proud of us. We have units, we have Subala majors rising up to that level. And it's very great. Now, so Nepalese don't want that their youth should go and be subservient. The Britishers never paid them well. It's only in 1997 they got them to some level because they held strikes outside 10 Downing Street. They were exploited there, unlike India. So now, and Nepalese themselves don't want their youth to go out. Other thing is, if they go to China may be showing interest. Let me say, there is a great cultural, religious, ethnic divide. Nepal has been a Hindu kingdom erstwhile. It's an Hindu nation. China doesn't believe in other religions. Look what they do in Xinjiang and what they do in East Turkestan with the Uyghurs. It's a great example. So that fear, I fear for the Nepalese people. They should take care of that.
Sir, man, we are running short of time. if I'll just sum down certain points which came into being in discussion. Firstly, this aspect of deep strikes is going to be the concept for the future. Deep strikes by the by air effort, like for example, what the Russians did, they destroyed the complete air force of Ukraine before they started the offensive. Deep strikes by the PGMs, deep strikes by the missiles. This is going to be both on military, logistic, and economic targets. It's very important to have a very credible ISR system, that's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance systems, because deep strikes can only take place if the ISR system is credible. Then technology is coming in a very big way in the armed forces. So your complete doctrines, strategy, and operational plans for force restructuring has to be based, I feel, based on how the technology is being adopted by the armed forces and the country. Drones have played a very major role both in Azerbaijan as also in Russia-Ukraine warfare. Now even the Americans, the other day, the drone was being buzzed by a Russian aircraft. So drones is coming in a very big way, sir. Media, information warfare, which has media part of it, has to be credible. A lot of effort is to be given towards the media and the allied aspects to media, like cyber warfare, the intelligence aspects of it. So these are the points which I have gleaned out of the talk that I have had with you, sir. Would you like to add some more points to it?
Yeah, you have been emphasizing on ISR. And I think one of the classic examples is the Starlink usage provided by Elon Musk, which was far ahead even what American government could provide, and which got the Russians generals taken out when they were at the front. Specific precision intelligence and precision strike could take place.
Yeah.
Now, that is a very important aspect of ISR, which has come about. And yes, drone warfare and anti-drone warfare. Now, these have to be developed. So the air defense systems are going to have a bigger role in times to come. And then the tank and the anti-tank warfare. You see the importance of tanks. You see this, the Javelin anti-tank system and the NLAW, the new generation light anti-tank weapon system. They have been very effective because they got the top attack.
Top attack, yes.
So now technology you mentioned. So the technology has to cater for better protection on the turret, on the tank turret top. Now, these are the things which evolving technologies will keep taking place. And you see, it's the STEM, I would say, which was much in news with the Indo-US relation, that science, technology, engineering, and maths. You know, all these, the STEM is to the forefront of military technology. And, you know, that is where we are. ICET, again, initiatives in critical engineering, this thing. So this is where the military capabilities are going to give rise. And no doubt, then that's how the strategies, it'll give count to the nation's capability. And the nation's capability then will develop more capable military. And then your ambitions enlarge. And that's what I look to India enlarging itself as a major arms exporter.
So thank you very much. It has been a very illuminating talk with you, and covering a very wide subject. And thank you very much indeed, sir. Hopefully, we'll be meeting again sometime very soon.
Thank you, Deepak. You always pose challenges. So thanks very much.
Thank you, sir. All the best, sir. Bye.